Welcome back to an episode of the Open Source Cafe, and today we're going to talk about Kubernetes security. We're joined today here by Amir and Jonathan. So, would you like to tell our viewers a little bit more about yourself? How about we go with Jonathan first?
Yes, thank you very much, Kunal, for having us here. Great to be talking with you. I'm Jonathan. I'm the VP Marketing and Biz Dev for a company called ARMO. ARMO is a Kubernetes security startup based in Israel, but growing now. By the way, we're also hiring globally. So yeah, great to be here and excited to talk about Kubernetes security.
Hi, my name is Amir Koushansky. I'm the VP Product at ARMO. And together with you, people from the community, we build a Kubescape for you to use and gain value. So keep on sending us the issues and requirements that you want to see in the next versions.
Amazing. And if you want to learn more about Kubescape, I'm going to be doing a tutorial on that. So make sure to check out the links in the description and the DevOps bootcamp that we're doing. Other than that, you can also contribute. And there's also a swag store where you can contribute, win points, and then use those to redeem nice swag for you all. But yeah, let's get started. Jonathan, would you like to take it away?
Yes, thank you, Kunal. So I would like to talk a little bit about Kubernetes and Kubernetes security, kind of the landscape. What have we been seeing in this space for the last, I would say, few months and a year? Very exciting, keeps on changing all the time. And then maybe to explain a little bit about Kubescape, which is our open source product that has become really popular in the last few months. And Amir will also show a few kind of screens of what it is and how to use it. And that will be, I think, a nice introduction to what we're going to do together, Kunal, in the next few weeks. So if you don't mind, I will share a few slides about this space.
Yeah.
Cool. So few things that I think that are probably everyone understand, but I think it's important to put it kind of in front of everyone. So first of all, Kubernetes is definitely the new cloud native operating system. And the survey that came out from CNCF last week has shown that it became de facto the operating system for all those cloud native architecture. Few interesting numbers that I picked up from this report. 96 of the organizations that were surveyed are either using or evaluating Kubernetes today. 5.6 million developers are actually using Kubernetes worldwide, and that's about 31% of all the backend developers out there, which is pretty important. And definitely this number is going to grow in the next couple of years. And Kubernetes is increasingly being used in production by companies leveraging managed services and package platforms. We see more and more companies, enterprise, big ones even, moving to Kubernetes and starting to run their mission critical application on top of it. And that's why one of the things that we have seen that Kubernetes is no longer off the radar for attackers. I think that a year ago, when we talked with people, we talked with security people, DevOps people, the question that were asked was, is Kubernetes really a target? Do you actually see any attacks on Kubernetes? So the answer is definitely yes. We see more attacks targeting Kubernetes. We see the level of sophistication is becoming much more sophisticated, much more advanced attacks. And definitely, as more companies moving into Kubernetes, we're going to see this trend only increasing. Current solutions in the market today are not providing what we see as the optimum or the best solution that you guys need, right? Some of those solutions create too many alerts. They are too complex, and they're not providing you the real value that you guys, the developers, the DevOps guys, really need. Security is not considered by many to be a DevOps-like solution or tool, and I think this is one of the bigger problems. So today, when we're dealing with protecting Kubernetes, if I need to kind of categorize it, there are two areas you're probably going to look at. The first one is about posture management. which is all about trying to find vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, security issues as early as possible in the pipeline, right? The other area is all about runtime protection. How can we detect and prevent attacks while they happen during runtime and in the production environment, right? So while posture management is all about trying to shrink the attack surface, to try to fix as many problems as we can as early as possible before these issues get into production, runtime protection is basically about, okay, the attack is now happening, how I can detect, contain, and maybe to some extent even prevent it from causing any damages. Now, when we deal with runtime protection, most of the solutions today in the market are either based on what we call anomaly behavioral analysis, trying to understand if something is not normal or not behaving the way it should, which can indicate on an attack, or different types of solutions that are based on network segmentation, firewall, etc. These two types of solutions, these two types of categories, has a lot of challenges today that we see and we hear people talk about. When it comes to posture management, basically it's an endless chase. There will always be a misconfiguration and vulnerability that you need to deal with, right? Almost every week a new critical CVE is being published. Every new version of Kubernetes is bringing more type of complexities and more types of misconfiguration that you need to deal with. A lot of the images that you bring from the outside, from third-party repositories, comes with vulnerabilities that are already built in. So it's going to be a very kind of long process to deal with all those misconfiguration and vulnerabilities, and no practical way to have all of them fixed in a reasonable time frame. Also, when we're dealing with configuration, today there is no one single source of truth of how Kubernetes need to be configured. There are different best practices, different frameworks, different guidelines, and we all know that Kubernetes is pretty complex when it comes to the way that you set it up and the way that you need to configure it, right? Kubernetes was not designed with the security mindset from the get-go, right? It's a flexible, open platform, and there are many ways that you can configure it, and there are many ways that you can configure it in the wrong way. And so this potentially can bring thousands of different misconfigurations that can create, can be exploited by a potential attack. So when we're dealing with runtime protection, and most of the solution in this space will be based on trying to understand what normal is against what not normal, what anomaly is. That also create a lot of problems, right? How can you define a baseline on a platform that keeps changing all the time, right? It changes from one end because new releases, new version of Kubernetes are keep being updated all the time, or keep being released to the market all the time. And each release can change the way that this baseline is. On the other hand, also the workloads, the microservices, etc., that are running on Kubernetes keep changing all the time. How do you know if a microservice or a workload is doing what it was expected to do, and it's not now trying to do something that it shouldn't, right? So this ability to create a baseline and then to understand what normal is versus what not normal is, which can indicate on an attack, is very hard. And that's why many of these solutions create a lot of false positives, create a lot of complexity, and also can create a performance impact during the production. Many of these solutions are based on sidecars and daemon set, etc., which could have a lot of issues on your performance. And a lot of these solutions will require a lot of resources to manage, etc. One of the biggest problems, by the way, we see in this market, that while you need those two types of solutions, right? We're not saying that you don't need. You have to use posture management, and you probably have to use runtime protection. One of the biggest issues that there is today that they are not talking with each other. we're talking about two siloed type of solutions. In many cases, even if you're dealing with one vendor that claims to have both of these solutions, is not necessarily providing that as a one solution that is integrated with these type of solutions. And that's a big problem I think we have in this market, that I cannot use the knowledge and the insights and the data I gain from doing the posture management, when I'm scanning for misconfiguration, when I'm scanning for vulnerabilities, in order to use this data, in order to have a better runtime protection, and vice versa. It could be very cool if I know about vulnerabilities or misconfiguration that I cannot fix right now, and I can tell my runtime solution, you should know about it, and then you should protect me against these type of vulnerabilities or misconfiguration to be exploited, and vice versa. So this gap that we have, that from these two types of solutions not talking with each other, I think this is one of the biggest challenges we have in this market right now. So let's talk about a little bit about like numbers, and kind of to explain and to show where we think the market is right now. So when it comes to who is responsible for security in the organization, according to a recent survey, the majority said that this is a DevOps job, and this is a developer's job. And I think this is exactly the where security solution need to understand what they need to do. Because if the DevOps person or the developer person is responsible for the security tool that he's using or need to use have to be exactly like any other DevOps like tool that he's using. And that's one of the problems I think there is in the market today, that many of these security tools available today are not developers tools. They are security tools, right? They're not talking the same language. They're not easy. They're not open. They're not open source, many of them. And that's one of the problems I think that we as a community in this area has right now. So when we are thinking about, what are the security issues that we are going to face, according to a recent survey and also by Gartner, the number one reason for a security incident to happen are misconfiguration, right? Misconfigured Kubernetes environments will probably be the number one reason for data breaches that are happening or going to happen in Kubernetes. Also vulnerabilities, and also you can see here different type of issues as well, right? So that's for us, ARMO, the company that is dealing with these type of security issues and trying to build tools and solutions for you guys. This is the number one thing that we have in mind when we're thinking about what kind of tools we want to develop. And that's exactly why we built Kubescape and released it to the market a few months ago. Right? It was actually during August last year. So I would like to talk a little bit about what Kubescape is and give you kind of guys introduction of how you can use it. So first of all, a few kind of statistics about Kubescape. It became one of the most popular Kubernetes security open source tools right now. In 5 months, we got more than 5,100 stars on GitHub. It grew very, very fast, and we were happy to see it, right? It grew very, very fast and gained a lot of users and a lot of followers in a very short of time, which was a great indication for us that we are doing the right things and going in the right direction. Many companies today use Kubescape. Many developers and DevOps from interesting companies are using it. And you can basically go to GitHub and look for Kubescape and follow this project. It's an open source project, as I mentioned, so everything is available, everything is transparent, and you can also, by the way, contribute code to this project. Now, Kubescape started, when we started Kubescape, the first thing we did was to provide a simple tool for you guys to scan your Kubernetes clusters and deployments according to the NSA and CISA hardening guidelines. The NSA and CISA released a very interesting guideline on August last year to kind of provide best practices how to make sure that your Kubernetes is defined and set up in the right way. And when we saw that they released this guidance, we said, okay, it would be very nice to have an open source tool that can actually scan your environment, can scan your cluster, can scan your deployment and tell you where it's not following these best practice and guidance, guidelines by the NSA and CISA. So this is how we started. And we saw the kind of the adoption was very, very fast. And then we started to think, okay, how we can take this project forward, how we can provide something that is a little bit bigger than just making sure that your environment is deployed or is configured in the right way. And today I'm happy to say that Kubescape became a single pane of glass, but a very interesting single pane of glass. First of all, you can use Kubescape to analyze your clusters, deployment, YAML files, Helm chart, etc., and to see what kind of risk level you have, right? Which is basically telling you where you have misconfigurations and how do you compare against various frameworks, not just the NSA and CISA any longer, but also against the Mantra attack framework. We developed our own framework, which we call ARMO Best, which contains different controls that you won't be able to find in any other framework. DevOps best practices, and we continue to add more and more a framework as time goes by. By the way, you can also configure and set up your own customized framework. You can decide that you don't want to run the NSA as is, and you want to build your own framework that is relevant to your own needs and requirements. So this is one area which is all about risk analysis and compliance. The other area that we added to Kubescape is called RBAC Visualizer, Role-Based Access Control. We heard by many users that RBAC is very complex and it's too hard to understand exactly all the everything related to roles and entities, etc. So we decided to provide a very easy to understand, easy to use visualizer that in a very graphic way tells you exactly who talks with who has privileges, who can access secrets, etc. And you can also do inquiries, etc., to really understand exactly what's happening there. The other area that we have today in Kubescape is everything related to container images scanning for vulnerabilities, and another very graphical way to understand which vulnerabilities you have, what are the critical ones, where you need to focus, etc., etc. So today when you use Kubescape, you actually get those three different areas all in one tool, by the way, for free. Now, Kubescape, as I mentioned, is an open source tool, so you can either use it from GitHub using the CLI and run it directly from GitHub, or you can use the UI of Kubescape, which is very nice, it's very easy, and there you only need to register, put your name, an email, or use the GitHub or any other, like Google, any other way, and you just need to register. And you can use the UI and the dashboard as well. So you have two ways how you can use Kubescape here. And you can do that across different cloud providers. We support JKE, AKS, EKS, OpenShift. So you can use one tool to run different functionalities across different type of clouds. By the way, you can also do that across your organization. You can make sure that Kubescape can be kind of your tool to make sure that all your developer teams are working according to the same standards, the same frameworks, and the same guidelines. So it really became a single pane of glass for different teams across different type of clouds and across teams in your organization. So when you use Kubescape, you basically can do, I would say, three main things. First of all, define and enforce best practices according to different type of frameworks, right? Making sure that all your organization is working according to the same standard, using the same guidelines, using the same best practices according to different frameworks as well. And by the way, also understand the risk and also the risk trends along over time. You can identify and prevent risks from happening from the CI/CD up to production. across different clusters, across different deployments, etc. And you can also making sure that the environment, you keep tightening the environment, you keep reducing the attack surface. One of the coolest things that we offered from Kubescape is also a way to fix and remediate some of the issues you have in a very easy and simple way. We call it assisted remediation. We don't just tell you where you have problems or issues, or that you have problems or issues. We actually tell you exactly where the problem is, up to the YAML file, the line in the YAML file that need to be changed, including recommendation how to change it, right? And so I think these are the kind of the main things that you can do with Kubescape today. And as I said, we keep developing it and we keep enhancing it with different features and different capabilities together with the community as an open source project. So how do you use it? And we'll show kind of a short demo when I'm done. You go to GitHub. You basically need just to deploy and run Kubescape, 2 lines of code in your cluster. You get immediately results in less than 3 minutes. From there, you can go and register to the UI. And from there, you can have a very nice way to manage your cluster, manage your deployment. And you can also add from there Kubescape into your CI/CD to find issues early and to avoid any delays. By the way, we also have a Visual Studio extension. So it's really cool because while you write the YAML files, you can actually start detecting issues and misconfiguration that you may have. Where we go from here, so as I mentioned, Kubescape today helps you to make sure that all the configuration is set up in the right way, making sure that your deployment is secured from misconfiguration, from vulnerabilities, from RBAC violations, etc. And from there, we also want to go into the runtime part and start also add capabilities and functionalities that may be relevant into your runtime, helps you to go into a zero trust mode, etc. But these are things that yet to come. So you probably just want to start use Kubescape now, and very easy. Go to the GitHub page, deploy and run it, and start using it. The first deployment is completely API based with read-only privileges. You don't need to install anything. You can do that later on if you want to start doing a configuration scan and sorry, if you want to do some init scan and the RBAC, but that's when you're dealing with the UI and you're dealing with the more advanced capabilities. So this is basically it. I hope I was able to kind of to share our view of the Kubernetes security market, where it is, where it's going, some issues, challenges, and also how Kubescape can help you deal and manage your Kubernetes security across different clusters, across different environments, different cloud providers, etc.
Thanks, Jonathan, for the presentation. It was a great overview to Kubernetes security and where Kubescape fits in. Let me talk to you a little bit more about the configuration management that you mentioned. So where do we start as a user when we see like a lot of issues and when we are dealing with misconfigurations? And like what is the first step and what's like the procedure to follow? I mean, maybe you can take that.
Yeah, sure. So let me share my screen. This is Kubescape, and this is I'm using the UI, but you can see these results also in CLI. So I'm going to talk about the UI, but you can definitely do most of the things in the CLI. So I'm starting my journey, my configuration journey, or fixing my misconfiguration journey by looking at the failed results. So I need to go over each one of the controls and click on the number of failed resources, and basically then decide what is okay and what is designed this way versus what is new to me and unknown to me. So for example, maybe cluster admin, these two roles, the system roles, are designed to be cluster admins. But this guy, D.W. Wertenthal at Armosec.io, I don't know if he needs to be a cluster admin. So I can go and ask and see. And once I understand that he needs to be the cluster admin because he's my DevOps engineer for the cluster, then I need to put it in exception. Once I put something in exception, the next time I scan, I will not see it as a failed resource. I will see it as something that has an exception. And if it has an exception, it means that I dealt with it, I approved it. Okay, so once you run a scan, we show you the difference. So for example, here you can see that in the previous scan, you had 6 failed resources. 2 were set as exceptions, but now you have 14. And if you click on the failed resources, we kind of, and if you click on the failed resources, we will highlight in blue what are the new resources that failed. So now let's get back to my latest scan and go over the same procedure as we did before. And you will be, let's choose one of the controls. Let's say this allow privilege escalation. And if I click on allow privilege escalation, and once I set all the exceptions, and I want to understand why my Argo CD deployment deploys an Argo CD Redis that allows privilege escalation. So I can go and click on this icon, and basically it gives me the ability to understand, to see the definition of the object, the YAML file, of Argo CD Redis, and understand where it failed. So now you can see that something is missing in this part, and you can read the remediation suggestion. And in the next release, we are also going to show you the property that is actually missing. So, I'm starting by seeing all the resources that failed on a control. I set exceptions. Once I set the exceptions, I can go and drill down and understand why it failed. And then once everything is set, either as exception or I fixed these issues, I can scan again, and I suppose I need to see my risk score goes down. Now, for the assistant remediation, instead of going through each control, I can go through the resource itself. So you can see here, this is the resource view. Now, instead of seeing a control and where it failed, I see a resource and all the controls in which the resource failed, and I can read about it, and I can set exceptions from here as well. But I can also see the definition of the control, or the definition of the resource, and then each one of the controls that failed and why they failed or where they failed. And I can jump in and go one by one and understand why it failed. So that's basically the way to do that. Now, many of the users that I talk to, they understand that the basic unit that we're using to scan your environment is controls. We call it controls. In some cases, people call it policies, but we call it controls. And basically, each one of the controls is a test that we're doing. Now, the tests that currently we are covering are tests that are based on your Kubernetes resources configuration. It can be deployment, service, all the YAML files that you have, the API servers. So in some cases, you need to integrate with your cloud control plane in order for us to be able to ask questions about your API settings. And then we also look at your image scanning results. We look at your worker node configuration. You just need to run us run Kubescape with the enable host scanning flag, and then we will be able to scan these specific controls. Now, some of the controls are customizable, meaning that you will see it if you go to the controls. We added this wheel that basically says that you can configure this specific control. So if we go to the control definition, you will be able to see that I can go on and said, in my organization, I forbid my developers to take things from Quay or to take things from Docker Hub, and then it will be in the block list. And right now we will inform you if such a case exists in your Kubernetes cluster. So, to summarize, Kunal, my answer is basically create your own framework. You can create a framework based on all the controls that you see here. So, for example, we come with 4 frameworks, but you can create your own framework and decide which one of the controls will be part of this framework. So set your framework, adjust the controls to your environment, run a scan, see the failed resources, set the exceptions. Once you and use assisted remediation to understand where it is failing, and once you do that, you're in the right path to figure and solve all these misconfigurations. Does it make sense?
Amazing. Well, thanks a lot for sharing and a brief overview as well. That was great. We're talking about these, rules and checks and stuff. How can we share this information? Where is Kubescape deployed, and what sorts of integrations do you provide?
So right now we have the ability to send information to Slack. In the next release, we are going to have the ability to collaborate through exporting items through Excel. So you will be able to take it out. I'm calling the community to talk to me directly. We are working on collaboration features in Kubescape because we do think that once you find all these misconfigurations, probably you're not going to solve them by yourself. And you need to assign them to other people. And we want to do it in the right way. So, if someone in the crowd has this pain and he wants to influence and contribute, he can contact me directly.
Yes, but we also have, but just to add, we also have now integrations with Jenkins, Circle CI. So Kubescape was built as an open source. So we also added now integration to Prometheus. Okay, so you can see, so you can use Kubescape with your other tools and with your others, with other the tools that you're using together, right? So you can see there everything that Amir showed, not just on Kubescape, but on other tools as well that you're using today.
No, that was actually my question. I want to ask about CI/CD pipeline. So I think that's thanks for answering that one. Cool.
Yeah, I think that the important part is that once you're able to set frameworks, you can use these frameworks or subset of these frameworks in all your stages of the SDLC lifecycle. You can create a subset of the controls and give it to your developers to use it in their VS Code, as Kubescape now runs as a VS Code extension. You can then take it and create a larger subset of controls and use them in your CI/CD pipelines. And we support many CI/CD pipelines. And then you can watch that your DevOps teams are actually doing best practices. And you can create your own best practice that is tailored to your organization. And then you can scan live clusters, dev clusters, production clusters, and kind of see that you're okay with the risk level that you're getting at the end of this process that I mentioned before. So, I think that this is what makes Kubescape great. You have all the aspects of Kubernetes security. We look at the code, at the image scanning. We look at the RBAC, at the capabilities, the different roles can perform in Kubernetes. And we give you an understanding of what is going on there. Because Kubernetes is great. We all love Kubernetes, but it's super complex and it's hard, mainly for new people that are starting to work with it. So we like to help them, to help you and not get breached.
Thanks, Amir and Jonathan, for sharing. Really had a great time interacting with you. And folks, if you want to get started with Kubescape, check out the links in the description. You can check out the GitHub repository, share your feedback over there. The community is it's a community-driven open source project, so they're always looking for feedback and suggestions and stuff, and contributors as well. So all the links will be listed in the description below. And thanks a lot for watching. Thanks again, Amir and Jonathan, for giving your valuable time. And we'll see you all in the next one. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.